Have you ever wondered what happens when a billionaire underestimates the wrong person? Billionaire hired a black woman to look after his daughter. He did something he never imagined he would do. Mr. Thompson, Dr. Camila, has refused our payment again. She said she doesn't want money tainted by those who destroyed her career. The assistant handed the sealed envelope back to the billionaire, who was watching his 5-year-old daughter playing in the penthouse garden with her nanny from the window on the 120th floor. Alexander Thompson, owner of a pharmaceutical empire worth $12 billion, felt a chill run down his spine. 3 months ago, he had hired Camila Santos to take care of Sophie after his wife died in an accident. The 32-year-old woman seemed perfect for the job, patient, loving, and with an inexplicable connection with his autistic daughter. What he didn't know was that Camila knew him very well, better than he could have imagined. "Sir, there's one more thing," his assistant continued hesitantly. "We found this recorded on the home security system." She played an audio file on her tablet. Camila's voice singing to Sophie, but not just any children's song. It was a complex melody in French about neural cells and synapses transformed into music to teach the girl about how her own brain worked. Are you ready for the twist that will change everything? Alexander immediately went down to the garden where he found Camila teaching Sophie to identify different types of leaves and explaining photosynthesis in a way that made the girl laugh and interact as she had never done before. Sophie, who barely spoke to specialized therapists, was chatting animatedly with this woman about molecular biology. "How do you know about neuroscience?" Alexander asked, approaching cautiously. Camila looked up and for a moment he saw something that disturbed him, not surprised at being discovered, but an almost imperceptible satisfaction, as if she had been waiting for this question. "Life teaches many things, Mr. Thompson," she replied, helping Sophie examine a butterfly with a magnifying glass. "Especially when you lose everything you've built and have to start over from scratch because of the greed of powerful people." The sentence hung in the air like a veiled accusation. Alexander felt he knew that voice, that determined look, but he couldn't place it. "Sophie, how about looking for more butterflies near the flowers?" Camila suggested, sending the girl away before standing up and facing Alexander directly. "I imagine you're wondering how a simple nanny knows so much about neuroscience, aren't you? Who are you really?" Alexander asked, his voice laden with growing anxiety. "Someone you should have gotten to know better before you destroyed her," she replied, pulling a faded Thompson Pharmaceuticals badge from her pocket. Dr. Camila Santos, former head of the Pediatric Research Department. Fired 2 years ago for refusing to falsify data on the side effects of drugs on autistic children. Alexander's world stopped. Now he remembered the brilliant scientist who had refused to sign the altered reports, who had threatened to expose the company, who had been publicly discredited and lost everything. The woman whose research on autism could have revolutionized treatments but interfered with the company's profits. "You," he whispered, finally connecting the dots. "You're the researcher who you had Dr. Richards destroy professionally, who had her medical license suspended based on false accusations of misconduct, who lost her home, her career, and her reputation because she refused to compromise the safety of children like your daughter." Camila smiled, but there was no warmth in that smile. "Yes, that's me." Alexander reeled back, realizing the magnitude of the situation. The woman who cared for his daughter was the same woman he had ordered to be silenced and destroyed. And now she had complete access to Sophie, knew all of his family's secrets, and was obviously not there by accident. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly. Camila watched Sophie running happily among the flowers. A child who was finally thriving after months of proper care based on real science, not drugs for profit. "For now, keep doing my job, taking care of a child who deserves the best treatment possible, not what's most profitable." While everyone around her underestimated this seemingly simple nanny, none of them realized that she wasn't just taking care of Sophie. She was meticulously documenting every piece of evidence of previous medical negligence, every unnecessary prescription, every corporate decision that had ruined not only her life, but the lives of hundreds of other children. If this story of second chances and justice is touching your heart, don't forget to subscribe to Black Voices to find out how a woman who was unjustly destroyed turned her apparent defeat into the smartest revenge a corrupt billionaire could ever imagine. Alexander felt his legs buckle as he fully comprehended the situation. The woman who had cared for Sophie for the past 3 months, who knew every family routine, every secret of the house, every vulnerability of his daughter, was the same person he had ordered to be professionally annihilated. "You can't be here," he said, trying to maintain control. "I'm going to have to fire me," Camila interrupted, watching Sophie play carefree. "Sure, explain to your autistic daughter, who is finally making progress after years of inadequate medication, why the only person who understands her really needs to leave." The cruelty of the situation hit Alexander like a slap in the face. Sophie had become attached to Camila in a way he had never seen before. The girl who had barely spoken was now babbling about neurons and synapses as if they were characters in fairy tales. "What do you want?" he asked again, this time with less authority in his voice. Camila took her phone out of her pocket and showed him a photo on the screen. Sophie smiling broadly as she drew a diagram of the brain. "I want her to continue receiving the proper treatment she deserves, not the pharmaceutical cocktails your company pushes on children like her to increase profits." 2 years ago, Dr. Camila Santos was considered one of the leading experts in pediatric neuroscience in the country. Her research on non-pharmacological treatments for autism was revolutionizing the field, showing that behavioral and educational therapies were far more effective than heavy medication in young children. That's when Thomson Pharmaceuticals offered to fund her research and everything started to fall apart. The deal seemed perfect. Unlimited resources in exchange for data that would support the launch of a new line of pediatric drugs. "Dr. Richards wants to see you in his office," the assistant had said on that fateful Monday morning. Richards, Thomson's director of research, was waiting with a folder full of modified reports. "We just need a few adjustments to your data, Dr. Santos. Some statistics that better show the effectiveness of pharmacological treatments." Camila had looked at those falsified numbers and felt nauseous. "These data don't match my actual results. The children who received only medication showed significant worsening in cognition and social behavior." "The data show what we need them to show," Richards had replied coldly. "Your job is to sign the reports, not question them." When she refused, Thomson Pharmaceuticals' destruction machine swung into action with surgical precision. First came anonymous accusations of professional misconduct. Then allegations that she had manipulated data to obtain funding. Finally, an audit that discovered irregularities in her research. Within 6 months, Camila lost her medical license, her lab, her home, and her reputation. The scientific community, intimidated by Thomson's power, abandoned her completely. No one wanted to hire a dishonest researcher who had been publicly exposed. "You know what's funny," Camila said, interrupting Alexander's memories. "During those 2 years working in cleaning and child care jobs to survive, I learned more about the real world than in my entire academic career. I learned that people like you believe that power and money make you untouchable." Alexander tried to regain control. "Look what happened to you. Maybe it was excessive. I can talk to some people. Maybe we can find a way to what? Buy me back." Camila's laughter was icy. "Do you really think that after losing everything, after being publicly humiliated, after going hungry because no one would hire me, I'd be here for money?" She moved closer to him, her voice lowering to a dangerous whisper. "Alexander Thomson, you have no idea what you did when you destroyed my life. Not only did you turn me into a person with nothing to lose, but you gave me enough time to find out exactly what your company does to children like Sophie." Alexander swallowed hard. "What are you implying?" "I'm not implying anything. I'm stating it. Sophie isn't the first autistic child your company has used as a guinea pig for unnecessary drugs. In fact, I have a list of 237 children who have been given inappropriate prescriptions based on the same falsified data you asked me to sign." Alexander's blood ran cold. That's impossible. How would you have access to the same network that helped me get this job as a nanny?" Camila smiled coldly. "You'd be surprised how many healthcare professionals were outraged when they found out the truth about my dismissal. People who now voluntarily collaborate by providing information about Thomson Pharmaceuticals' practices." Sophie ran up to them holding a paper butterfly she had made. "Look. I made the neurons on the wings just like you taught me. Beautiful sweetheart, said, hugging the girl. Why don't you show your father how synaptic transmission works like we learned today? As Sophie excitedly explained complex neuroscience concepts with the simplicity of a 5-year-old, Alexander realized he was looking at living proof of how his company had been unnecessarily medicating his own daughter for years. Every word Sophie spoke was evidence of how she had blossomed without the heavy medications Richards had recommended. The girl who had once been apathetic and disconnected now sparkled with curiosity and natural intelligence. Daddy, did you know that when I was taking those bad medicines, my brain cells were getting slow? Sophie asked innocently. Camila explained to me why I felt so sad and tired all the time. The question hit Alexander like a shot. His own daughter had just described in child terms how his company's medication had damaged her development for years. Camila watched Alexander's face turn pale. Funny how the truth becomes clear when explained by a 5-year-old, isn't it? Sophie has been documenting her own progress without medication for 3 months. Her drawings, her words, her cognitive advances. All recorded and dated. You're recording everything, Alexander realized, his voice trembling slightly. Every conversation, every bit of progress, every moment Sophie demonstrates how much she's been harmed by the treatments your company pushed on her, Camila confirmed. But the most interesting thing is discovering that you're not just a greedy businessman who profits from child suffering. You're a father who poisoned his own daughter for years without realizing it. Alexander felt the world crumble around him. Not only was he being confronted by a woman he had unjustly destroyed, but he was realizing that his own corporate decisions had harmed Sophie for years. And now this woman who had every reason to destroy him had complete access to his life and enough evidence to ruin not only his company but his relationship with the only person he truly loved. What he didn't know was that every word of this conversation was being broadcast live to a network of medical malpractice lawyers and that Camila hadn't spent the last 2 years just surviving. She had spent it meticulously building the most devastating case the American pharmaceutical industry had ever faced. The question echoing in the air was simple. What does a powerful man do when he discovers that the person he has most underestimated has the power to destroy everything he has built, including the love of the only person who really matters in his life? That night, after Sophie went to bed, Alexander locked himself in his office and called his private lawyer. David, I need you to investigate everything about Camila Santos. Financial history, family, contacts, where she's lived for the last 2 years, everything. Sure. But may I ask why didn't she sign a confidentiality agreement? Just do what I'm asking, Alexander replied curtly, hanging up. What he didn't know was that 3 floors below, Camila was having a video conference with 5 people in an encrypted virtual room. On the screen were familiar faces. Dr. Martinez, the pediatrician who had lost his job for questioning Thompson's prescriptions. Sarah Chun, an investigative journalist specializing in pharmaceutical corruption. And lawyer Michael Roberts, who had been building cases against big pharmaceutical companies for years. Today's audio was perfect, said Roberts, reviewing the recordings. We have him admitting knowledge of data falsification and inappropriate medication of his own daughter. That's direct evidence of negligence. What about the other cases? Asked, 237 families confirmed so far, Dr. Martinez replied. All with children who received prescriptions based on the same false data you refused to sign. Some have developed permanent side effects. Sarah Chun adjusted her glasses. My editor has approved the series of reports. 5 main stories starting next week. But we need the smoking gun. Something that proves Alexander knew personally about the falsification. Leave that to me. Camila smiled in a way that didn't reach her eyes. He'll hand me that proof himself without even realizing it. Over the next few days, Alexander watched Camila with growing paranoia, but she remained the perfect babysitter. Sophie was happier than ever, her cognitive abilities improving daily, and she had completely stopped having the anxiety episodes that plagued her when she was on medication. Daddy, can I show you something? Sophie asked one morning at breakfast, holding a tablet. Camila taught me how to make videos about science. Alexander nearly choked on his coffee when he saw dozens of videos of Sophie explaining neuroscientific concepts dated and chronologically organized, showing her progress without medication. Each video was documented evidence of how she had blossomed after stopping Thompson's medications. "Sophie, honey, how about we keep these videos just between us?" he suggested nervously. "But why?" Camila said it's important to document scientific progress. She said other children can learn from it. Camila appeared in the kitchen at that moment. "Any problem with the educational videos?" "I just think Sophie is too young to be on video," Alexander replied, trying to maintain control. "I understand your concern. It's natural for a father to want to protect his daughter's privacy, especially when she's showing such extraordinary progress after significant changes in medical treatment," Camila replied. Each word loaded with double meaning. That evening, Alexander confronted Camila directly. "I know what you're doing. Filming Sophie, documenting everything. You want money. How much money?" Camila laughed genuinely. "Alexander, you really don't understand, do you? This was never about money. When you destroyed my career, you taught me something valuable. Some things are more important than profit. Like the truth." "The truth? What truth?" "The truth about how many children like Sophie are being unnecessarily medicated because of the data you forced Richards to falsify. The truth about the $400 million in profits your company made from pediatrically unproven drugs. The truth about how you became Father of the Year by medicating your own daughter with drugs you knew were harmful." Alexander felt the blood drain from his face. $400 million. How do you know about? I've had 2 years to rebuild my life and find out exactly what your company did after destroying me. You'd be surprised how many people are willing to share information when they find out that a researcher was silenced for refusing to compromise child safety. She pulled out her phone and showed him a text message confirmed. Thompson personally approved the modified reports at the March 2022 meeting. "We have the meeting minutes. Richards has been working with us for 6 months. Camila explained calmly. Apparently, developing cancer made him reconsider some moral priorities. He wants to clear his conscience before he dies. Alexander recoiled, realizing the magnitude of what he was facing. "What do you want?" "I want you to make a choice. Tomorrow, you're going to get a call from Sarah Chen of Channel 7 News. She's going to ask you specific questions about data falsification and inappropriate pediatric medication. You can lie publicly as you've done for years, or you can tell the truth. And if I lie, then all the evidence we've collected, including Sophie's videos, Richard's confessions, internal company documents, and statements from 237 affected families, will be handed over not just to the press, but to the FBI, the FDA, and Congress simultaneously." "You're bluffing." Camila smiled and showed another video on her phone, Alexander from the night before in his office arguing with David about minimizing damage and controlling the narrative on pediatric side effects. The audio quality was crystal clear. "Your security system has some interesting vulnerabilities, especially for someone who spent 2 years learning technology while working as a janitor at a digital security firm." Alexander's world completely collapsed. The woman he had underestimated as a mere nanny had spent 2 years infiltrating his life, gathering evidence, building a network of allies, and meticulously preparing his complete destruction. On the other hand, Camila continued, watching his pale face. "If you cooperate, confess publicly, and help reform Thompson's practices to protect children like Sophie, I can guarantee that the focus of the investigations will be on the company, not you personally." "And Sophie, what happens to her during this whole scandal?" "Sophie will continue to receive the proper care she deserves. The question is, do you want to be remembered as the father who finally did the right thing or as the man who poisoned his own daughter out of greed?" As Alexander processed the ultimatum, a single question echoed in his mind: how had he been so arrogant as to completely underestimate a woman who had lost everything and consequently had nothing left to lose? More importantly, was there still time to make the right choice? Or had his own greed sealed the fate that Camila had meticulously crafted for him during 2 long years of silent preparation? Sarah Chen's call came at exactly 9 o'clock the next morning as Camila had promised. Alexander was in his office when his assistant announced Channel 7 News on line 1. "Sir, an investigative journalist wants to ask you some questions about pediatric drugs." "Mr. Thompson, this is Sarah Chun. We are investigating allegations that Thompson Pharmaceuticals falsified data on children's drugs for autism. Do you have any comment?" Alexander felt cold sweat trickle down his forehead. "I don't know what you're talking about. Our company has always followed all protocols. We have meeting minutes in which you personally approved modified reports, including a recording of Dr. Richards confessing that you ordered the falsification. Would you like to hear it?" Richards' voice echoed over the phone. Alexander said, and I quote, "I don't care about the actual data. I need numbers that approve our drugs or we lose 400 million. I have terminal cancer, Sarah. I'm not going to die with that guilt." Alexander's world collapsed. That's a fabrication. You can't. We also have statements from 237 families whose children were inadequately medicated based on this false data. And videos documenting the progress of one specific child. After stopping Thompson's drugs, your own daughter, Sophie, Alexander hung up the phone, his hand shaking, and ran out to the garden where he found Camila playing calmly with Sophie as if nothing was happening. "You," he shouted, completely losing control. "You orchestrated all of this." Sophie was startled by her father's shouting and ran behind Camila, who instinctively protected her. "Alexander, don't shout near Sophie. She's suffered enough from your neglect." "My neglect? I'm her father. And what kind of father medicates his own daughter with drugs he knows are harmful?" Camila replied with deadly calm. "Sophie, sweetheart, how about you go inside and draw? Daddy and I need to talk." When they were alone, Alexander grabbed Kama by the arm. "You destroyed my company, my reputation, everything. Get your hands off me," she said coldly, "or the next call will be to the police for assault." He let go of her, realizing that even in this moment of complete rage, she was still in complete control. "The report airs tonight at 8, Camila continued. 5 consecutive programs. The first story is about Sophie, how an autistic child blossomed after stopping unnecessary medication. The second is about the 237 other children. The third is about you personally approving the falsification of data. And the fourth," Alexander asked, already dreading the answer. "The fourth is about the $15 million in offshore accounts you hid from shareholders. Michael Roberts was very efficient in tracking down your tax havens." Alexander paled. "How did you find out about the fifth and final article?" Camila continued, ignoring the question. "Is about how you used pediatric research money to buy your mansion in Miami. The one Sophie doesn't even know exists. You have no proof of any of this." Camila took out her phone and played a crystal clear audio recording, Alexander arguing with his accountant about moving research funds to personal accounts before the audit. It was from 2 weeks ago, recorded in his own office. "Impossible," he whispered. "My office is bug-proof. For common equipment, yes, but not for technology that someone learns when they spend 2 years working for digital security companies during the day and studying electronic engineering at night." Camila smiled coldly. "Did you really think I spent 2 years just surviving?" Alexander sat heavily on a garden bench, finally understanding the magnitude of what he was facing. "What do you want? Money? A stake in the company?" "I've already told you it's not about money, but since you asked, I'll explain exactly what's going to happen to you." She sat down next to him, her voice low and controlled. "At 8 o'clock tonight, 14 million Americans will watch you being exposed as a man who poisoned his own daughter out of greed. At 9, the FBI will be knocking on your door with warrants based on the evidence we've provided. At 10, the Thompson board will vote for your immediate dismissal. And tomorrow morning, 237 families will sue you personally for moral and physical damages. Michael Roberts has calculated it. Approximately $2.3 billion in damages." Alexander covered his face with his hands. "You want to see me bankrupt? I don't want to see you bankrupt. I want you to experience what it's like to lose everything because you refuse to compromise your principles. The only difference is that I lost everything defending children and you're going to lose everything because you harmed children." At that moment, Alexander's phone rang. It was his lawyer, David. "Alexander, you need to come to the office immediately. The FBI is here with search and seizure warrants, and the shareholders have called an emergency meeting to remove you. It's on CNN, Fox, every channel." Alexander hung up and looked at Camila with a mixture of terror and admiration. "How did you coordinate all this?" 2 years of meticulous planning. Every move calculated, every ally carefully recruited. Every piece of evidence patiently collected. She stood up. "But you know what's most ironic? You could have avoided all this by simply treating Sophie properly from the start. Your own greed created the evidence that destroyed you." Sophie appeared in the doorway holding a drawing. "Camila, I drew my happy brain without the bad medicine that made my brain cells sad." "Beautiful, sweetheart," Kama said, hugging the girl. "Your brain is getting brighter every day." Alexander looked at his daughter, healthy, happy, smart, and realized that the best thing that had happened to Sophie in 5 years was Camila coming into their lives, and he had treated her like a threat instead of a gift. "Camila," he said, his voice breaking. "Sophie, what's going to happen to Sophie during all this?" "Sophie will be fine. I have legal documentation showing that I am the most qualified caregiver for her specific needs. And unlike you, I put her well-being above everything else." At 8 o'clock that night, Alexander watched his life unravel on national television. Images of Sophie thriving without medication, interspersed with testimonials from other harmed children, created a devastating contrast. His own voice, secretly recorded, confessing crimes he thought no one would ever discover. What he didn't know was that that first report was just the beginning. Sarah Chun had built a series that would become a landmark in investigative journalism. And Camila Santos, the woman he had underestimated as a mere nanny, had orchestrated not only his downfall, but a complete revolution in the way American society viewed the pediatric pharmaceutical industry. As he watched his own destruction being broadcast live, one question echoed in Alexander's mind. How had such a powerful man been completely destroyed by someone he considered insignificant? More importantly, was there still a chance for redemption for a father who had spent years poisoning his own daughter without realizing it? Or had his greed sealed a fate that a brilliant scientist had meticulously crafted as the most perfect demonstration that true justice sometimes needs to be served by those who have lost everything to protect those who matter most? 6 months later, Camila Santos was officially appointed director of the National Institute of Pediatric Neuroscience, created specifically to reform children's treatments based on real scientific evidence. Her first decision was to establish protocols that would forever prevent the unnecessary medication of autistic children. Sophie, now 6, became the Institute's child ambassador, presenting educational videos that helped other children understand their own neurological development. Her extraordinary progress became an international case study. Alexander lost everything. Thomson Pharmaceuticals went bankrupt after paying $2 billion in damages. His mansion was auctioned off to cover legal debts. The FBI indicted him for corporate fraud, and he is serving a 12-year sentence in federal prison. "You knew from the beginning that I was innocent," Camila said during one of her visits to Alexander in prison, bringing him drawings Sophie had made for her father. "But you chose to destroy a scientist instead of protecting children." I didn't know Sophie was being harmed," Alexander whispered, looking at his daughter's drawings. "Of course you did. All parents know when something is wrong with their children. You just chose to ignore it because it was more profitable." Camila's story inspired a new generation of scientists to never compromise ethical principles under corporate pressure. Before he died, Richards created a foundation that funds independent research on pediatric drug safety. "Camila taught me that my brain works differently, but not worse," Sophie said in one of her most watched videos. "And that sometimes adults need kids to remind them of what's really important." This story teaches us that underestimating someone who has lost everything is the biggest mistake we can make because people with nothing to lose fight with a strength that privilege can never understand. Camila proved that the best revenge is not to destroy your opponent, but to build something so great that it renders irrelevant the evil they try to do to you. If this story of justice and second chances touched your heart, subscribe to Black Voices for more stories that show how true strength is born when we think we've lost everything. Because sometimes the universe puts extraordinary people exactly where they need to be.